Right now, they're route service technicians, right?
Sure.
What we want to see them is really become route managers. Like they should be
Okay.
managing their own route and managing it from a data sense
Okay.
so that they get some prioritization to say, I see this and now I know when or where I should go. And that's what we want to help develop is when is something occurring, where is it occurring, and when do I need to go there? Not necessarily the what. Right? We want technicians still to be technicians, but they should be able to not show up to a call and be blind.
Yeah. I hear
Right?
you.
They should show up and have an understanding of, hey, this is where the elevator was. This is what the elevator was doing when this anomalous behavior occurred. It's really about prioritizing the technician and allowing him to become more of a manager of that route.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. Does your workforce need a lift? At the Allred Group, we are committed to connecting your company with top talent that matches your needs. Give us a call at 404-890-0445. In this episode, I sat down with Robert Schram from Cedes to talk about how technology is reshaping the elevator industry. Robert's path into elevators started in construction, laying flooring to fund surfing trips, before eventually working his way from field repair into some of the most advanced conversations happening around IoT, predictive maintenance, and smart buildings. We discuss the evolution of elevator safety, what it means to unleash the voice of the elevator, and how new technology could transform the way elevators are maintained. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm always enjoy the conversations, and I'm looking forward to just digging a little deeper. And I'm curious, how did you get started in the elevator industry?
Yeah, thanks. So I actually started in high school doing commercial flooring.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process and starting to do floors and elevators, I started to come across elevator guys and then came out of the industry for a little while, out of construction for a little while. And then, I don't know, about 2010-ish, found myself kind of wanting to go back to something that had more stability. And I always found that, right, the construction industry as a whole
Yeah.
has a little bit more stability to it. And then, so through a friend at the time, they said, hey, you should go and, go to this company. It's a small independent elevator company. They're looking for people and you might have to start from the bottom, but I know you'll go. So I did. And I jumped in and started with an independent elevator company and started quite literally in small repair and kind of worked my way. So that was in 2011.
So when you say small repair, were you actually in selling small repair, or were you doing small repair, or what was kind of your?
Yeah. So I first started and spent, some time with technicians in the field learning. Then, so I spent a couple months, just, tagging along with route guys for, and then did some mods, with some mod guys and, spent 6 months doing that. And then came back into the office and started learning, right, the repair process and, started on small repair.
Interesting. So that time laying floors in elevators, did you ever think that, one day I'm going to be selling these things or selling components or?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool, learning from the technician that was, placed there. That was the first thing, right? So they took the
Sure.
elevator out of service and then a guy had to just stand there all day while we, worked on his elevator. And I thought that's kind of unique. You get paid to just stand here all day and watch us, and he was like, yeah, but you're touching my elevators.
Yeah.
I want to make
I
sure what
get it.
happens.
Yeah. Well, you told me you were doing that to get money to surf, right? I mean, that was fueling the addiction.
So that was it. Yeah. I had a few older guys that I was lucky to grow up under here in Florida that were all surfers, and construction was their way. So they would work heavy during the year. And then at summertime, we would all break out and take a couple weeks and, go down to Costa Rica.
Sweet.
And, so yeah, totally funded my way just to surf.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Do you still get out and surf? I guess that's the big
I
question.
do still try when I can, now that I have 2 little ones, it's more about getting them in the ocean, but I get my turn when I do.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love it. What was it that led you to, and I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, but Cedes, like Mercedes,
thanks. No,
is how you pronounced it for me.
Yeah.
Mercedes.
Yeah. So I would say 5 years ago, I started on with a company called Relayer, working in IoT the Internet of Things for
Sure.
elevators. And back then, with Relayer, we did some great things, won some good awards, especially around our dashboard. And then just over 2 years ago, while we were retooling the hardware, we, kind of connected with Cedes and kind of started learning about their hardware. And then it was kind of just a match made in heaven where the two companies were. And
Cool.
then Cedes bought us out, bought
Okay.
everything from Relayer, including myself and our whole back end team. And we were all blessed to, come over to this company. It has been really just a great opportunity for all of us to continue what we were working on, but now continue it with, world-class Swiss engineering and a company that brings, 40 plus years of doing the work that they do in this
Yeah, yeah.
industry.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you told me that this 40-year Swiss engineering really started with a light curtain invented in a kitchen, which
That, yeah, right.
I love it. Like, so walk us
Yeah.
through the origin story, right? Why was that such a breakthrough for elevator safety at the time?
Yeah. So we kind of got to go back to the 80s, if we will. And, during the time in the 80s, if you remember, doors used to open and close. There used to be a gray bar that came down or
Yeah.
came out of the door, which you would depress that bar and the two doors would open. But for people like my grandmother, especially, I mean, if that thing hit her, she would be black and blue.
Oh, for
So
sure.
then we said, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. And, the Schindlers of the world, the Otises of the world, right, were working. And I think Schindler came out with the first one that had basically infrared light at the bottom. And if you broke that beam, the doors would reopen. But it
Hmm.
was real finicky to like light bouncing off of the, out of the transoms and things.
Sure.
And, it only had a beam across the bottom. So people putting their hands above, it wouldn't stop.
Wouldn't stop it. Sure.
Bayat, who created Cedes from Switzerland, was a photonics engineer. So he measures distance with light.
Cool.
And so what he was able to do was basically in his kitchen, rig up 36 independent infrared beams and then cover them in such a way that the ambient light wasn't a problem.
Okay.
And lo and behold, he created, one. And then I would say that came out in about 90-ish, 1990. And then it became a standard in the industry, light
Sure.
curtains from that point on. But it made it much safer for people, right? Entering and exiting the elevator. As those doors would close, you would break more beams. The doors would physically reopen without striking.
Right. Right. That makes sense. And obviously it's a pretty big leap from crash bars to light curtains. What would you say is kind of the next step in change in safety technology that maybe others of us haven't considered yet?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been, elevators, 100 years or so, right? 100 plus years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been mostly about the hardware, right?
Yeah.
Rails, machines, controllers, doors, cables, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I really think the next wave or the most value is going to come from intelligence,
Cool.
right?
Okay.
So you're going to get into more software, sensors, and connectivity as a whole.
Very cool. Well, and you talked about, which I really liked, I think this is fascinating, unleashing the voice of the cabin. And so, what does that actually mean in practice? And how close are we to elevators that can truly communicate their own issues, right? Or say, hey, I'm
Yeah.
feeling sick. I need some attention,
Yeah, I mean, so it's nothing new in the sense of controllers. Controllers in a sense, have always been self-recovering.
Uh-huh.
And the remote monitoring has kind of been built in there, right? Thyssen and Otis and, have been playing around it for a long time. But I think they look at more of what the fault is. And so when we say we want to unleash, the voice of an elevator, we want to do it from a sense that we're almost, in our sense, we're agnostic from the controller,
Mhm.
right? Because that controller will give me the fault. But what we want to do is really not necessarily look at the fault, but we want to look at the behavior and understand what the elevator's doing. So
Hmm.
maintenance becomes predictive rather than reactive. And so what we
Okay.
want to do and what we want to look at is, so many elevators are still scheduled, the service is still scheduled. And, and that happens a lot of times after it breaks down. So it breaks
Yeah.
down. Now they
Yeah.
come in and do a service, right? blah, blah, blah. We want the doors or the elevator to alert us to a door operator degrading or ride quality degrading, a brake performance change, right? Traffic patterns that are unusual. And we want to do that from the sense of the cabin itself. So while the cabin is traveling or while the doors are opening or closing, we want to come and see that from that perspective. So that's why I say that's how we're, kind of unleashing the voice of the elevator,
Sure.
you know.
Right. Well, obviously, traditionally, most maintenance relied on technicians showing up and listening to or observing or surveying the elevator. Do you feel like that model is becoming outdated, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that we had technicians that could show up and ride and listen to an elevator. But even when I came in, it was a bit of a pet peeve of mine to hear that, even back then, I think, we had 50 elevators per tech, right? So a route
Sure.
had one technician, he had 50 elevators. And I kind of sat there and went, man, so he's going to show up, he's going to ride it, he's going to listen to it, and then he's going to prescribe what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And just in my head, I thought, God, I hope he had a good night's sleep. I hope his wife wasn't yelling at him outside the door as he's running this morning, or his kids are sick, or, just the noise of the world isn't there.
Sure.
I just don't understand how that's the way we do it, right? So, I really want to say that we want to see people show up and be prioritized with data from the elevator to know what's going on
Hmm.
so that we can see what the doors are doing and, say, okay, this is what the doors have been doing the last 7 days, because it may be, 20 or 30 days before I'm back at this building. What has occurred? And just going through a fault log doesn't really give me that. So we really want to see people, change from, uh, doing the prescribing from listening to it, from doing it from, hey, this is what I see
Yeah. Yeah.
from the elevator itself.
Yeah. Well, help me understand. I mean, it sounds like, on one hand, a lot of elevators get fixed once they break, right? And then it's like, oh, hey, that's the big signal for us to show up and try to get it back on. How much data do you have to have before you show up proactively and say, hey, this thing's squeaking, maybe it's 75% broken, but not broken, right? So, how do you make that determination that, now it's time to actually fix it before it breaks?
Yeah. So that's where I think you have technicians that can be technicians. And the difference today is allowing technicians to be, right now they're route service technicians, right?
Sure.
What we want to see them is really become route managers. Like they should be
Okay.
managing their own route and managing it from a data sense ability, right?
Okay.
So that they get again some prioritization to say, okay, I see this and now I know when or where, right, I should go.
Hmm.
And that's what we want to help develop is when is something occurring and where is it occurring and when do I need to go there? Not necessarily the what, right? We want
Sure.
technicians still to be technicians, but they should be able to they shouldn't show up to a call and be blind.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear
Right.
you.
They should show up and have an understanding of, hey, this is where the elevator was. This is what the elevator was doing when this anomalous behavior occurred. Was
Sure.
it traveling up? Was it traveling down? Speed of those doors and things like that. So, it's really about prioritizing the technician and allowing him to become more of a manager of that route and that
Sure.
elevator
Well, I
by
can
understanding the
imagine.
data.
I imagine they still get dispatched because the value of having that knowledge is, being out in the field, but showing up and maybe it's like a surgeon showing up, to the operating room and, this person just came in and here are all the vital signs and here are all the things, here's all the data we can give you. And then they can do exactly what they need to do versus riding it up and down 3 times. And, I don't know how they diagnose, but it sounds like showing up and having enough knowledge that you can actually make the repair.
Right, exactly, and having more data for that, right, is going to
Mhm.
really help them again and speed us up. I mean, I see, callbacks taking 2, 3, times just to figure out what went wrong, when if you had data going there and knowing what to bring with you, right now we can really affect what we do.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm just envisioning somebody's on the route to their next. They got a 30-minute drive. They're sitting in traffic, and AI is sitting there informing them. Okay, this is going on, and the the motor's doing this and the squeak's on this floor and the door is acting like this. And maybe that's one way to speed up that process of bringing them up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, again, we send technicians to go to a building, and the first thing they do is go to the controller, start to look down at all the faults that have occurred,
Sure.
clear that out. But they have typically one machine, one controller. But as that building grows, they have double the amount of doors.
Right. Right.
Right. So now if we can prioritize to what doors are doing what,
Yeah.
we can really start. And the more data we collect, the faster we can get to a predictive model.
Right.
We're not there today. But again, if you can adjust the data, understand it, you can make a better prescription or prescribe what needs to be done on that elevator. And then, oh, by the way, I can track to see what I did. If I tightened it to the left, did it do this? If I tightened it to the right, did it do that?
Right.
Now I can see that, and I, as a service manager, can say, yes, my technician went out. I can see what he did affected the elevator,
Sure.
both good or bad.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I mean, kind of real time, maintenance and observation, all of the above. And you had said, previously that you felt like the elevator industry is maybe 10 years behind adopting some of this and applying some of this technology. What would you say is holding it back from maybe adopting faster and gaining more of the benefits?
Historically, I think the industry as a whole has been slow to adapt technology. I mean, largely due to entrance, right? Entrance practices and culture, doing the things the way we've always been done or have always done it. I think many ISPs or the independent space was funded by skilled technicians, but they transitioned into business from deep expertise. But I think they had limited exposure to some of the tools. So they did it on their own and how they did it. And I think sometimes that prioritizes it or slows it down because, the majors put out elevators that are so proprietary that then it takes a while for the independents to get the software and needs.
Sure.
And so I think as that landscape shifted, I think we're trying to really capture that. But I think really the length of time or the slowness comes from, right, mostly due, I think, to the culture, if you will, in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, if it's working well for the contractors and the people who are doing the service, then hey, let's not mess it up and let's not invest a bunch of money in unproven technology. Right? There was no big push for it, I guess, is kind of what I was assuming.
Yeah. I mean, that legacy mindset, right, is there, but I think the landscape is changing, right? And it's shifting.
Yeah.
It's, so I think that founding generation, right, is starting to retire. The next generation coming in, I think, right, you got private equity investors. You have this driving or the introduction of the modern products and platforms, right?
Sure.
So we're recognizing, predictive maintenance and remote monitoring, integrated workflows. And so we're kind of at that inflection point, right?
Yep. Agreed.
And, where the digital transformation is no longer like a future aspiration, but a present day, imperative. And because of that, I think you start to slow the gap, if you will, between the amount of years, right? So,
yeah, agreed.
Up to 2016, I think everything, if you look at the codes, was mostly mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And now you start to look at 2019, 2022, 2025, and it's getting much more connected.
Sure.
Right. Now we're getting to much more digital security of the hoistway. Now we're getting into two-way communication. So, 3D door detection, all of these things are starting to transition us into a much more connected world. And so because of that, we're going to start to see the years shrink from adoption to adoption to adoption.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, and it is interesting, right, to see how IoT is kind of taken over the world, if you will, along with AI, right? Hey there, listeners, it's Matt, and I would love to know what you want to hear more of on the podcast. If you have a topic in mind or a guest you'd like to hear from, head over to elevatorcareers.net and drop a suggestion in the box, or you can email podcast@elevatorcareers.net. The link will also be in the description below. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Now, back to the show. But I'm curious, there does seem to be a little bit of tension between owners wanting transparency, but, that could also expose elevator companies or, some of the maintenance people. How do you see that dynamic playing out as as kind of the demand for, hey, give us transparency
Yeah.
continues to roll out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation's going to shift, right? And it's going to shift from how much does the elevator cost to what does poor performance cost me?
Hmm.
Right? So you're going to need to show the service quality. You're going to need to track, what the technician did on the last visit. Did it solve the issue, or is the anomalous behavior still occurring? Response times start to come into play. But I can, today the amount of cost that goes into a building for an owner when the elevator doesn't work is starting to, right, is starting to play into the overall cost. And these buildings, right, are just going up in cost, right? Things
Sure,
aren't
sure.
getting
Yeah.
less expensive for anybody out there. So I think, especially after COVID, you have so many buildings that just have never come back to, especially office spaces, right? That if I'm an owner trying to rent out a floor, I need to understand more about my building today to make sure I'm putting out the, commercial, if you will, to get someone to come rent my floor. And I need the data to know that information to, properly
Yeah.
go sell that floor or rent out that space. And the same goes for, trying to gain at residential properties, trying to gain the proper tenants. I see a lot of times in buildings where the tenants won't even report the elevator being out, because if they could show the elevator's been out a week, hey, Mr. Owner, I haven't had an elevator for a week. I'm paying X amount of dollars less on my rent
Oh, wow. Yeah.
because I had to walk the stairs.
Sure.
So they won't tell you the elevator's not working. And I see it in our own dashboards on, elevators in certain metropolitan areas that I can tell they didn't call the elevator in. And I'm calling and talking to the service manager
Right.
and finding out, oh, yeah, we definitely dispatched somebody. But they won't say it because they want to get money off their rent.
Off the rent. Right.
So, right, that tension's always going to be there with that grading. But look, I mean, today I think the messaging out there is, in the independent space is still like, we're local, we're small, and we answer our phone. And it's
Right.
like, we're all local. I mean, Tisson's still local. Their shop is right up the street from yours.
Sure. Sure. Same business part.
None of them answer their phones because every time I call, it goes straight to voicemail, and then the voicemail's full. Our routes are no longer what we used to challenge the majors on, right? Because that was the playback, when I first started in selling
Right.
maintenance was, hey, we have less we have less units per tech. But now we're growing into that 120 space and, per tech. And now you can't say that.
Yeah.
So there could be tension, but that's how it's all in how you, adopt this as being something that can, change you operationally, right?
Right.
We can stop running on arrival calls. We can, change how you dispatch a tech, therefore changing that labor rate. And that's going to help the tension conversation.
Yeah.
Because if I'm making more money.
Yeah. I like the way you said that. And I think it has the potential to change the dynamic and maybe even create competitive advantages if used properly, right? If we're monitoring and we've got all kinds of data, but we're not looking at it, we're not responding to it, well, then we might as well not have it, right? So,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely taken our system and said, hey, this is a tool. If you don't use the tool, right, then it's just another tool that's sitting in the the chest there. So yeah, I think companies do have to take the mindset to change. But I think we're starting to see that. I mean, the amount of times people have spent being firefighters and ambulance chasers, right, chasing that down elevator. You can only do it for so many years before you start to go, okay, I got to think of a better way of doing this.
Yeah. I agree.
Right.
Do you think that some elevator companies may be at risk if they don't adopt and respond to this kind of technology and really kind of provide that extra level of proactive service? I mean, curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I think the companies that think they're in the elevator business may lose to companies that realize they're in the uptime customer experience business.
I like the way you said that.
Right? Because whoever controls the door intelligence, the door health, the door performance, the data controls, right? That's the biggest source of callbacks. So if I can get all that and I can control the downtime and the customer pain, right, I'm going to win more
You win.
maintenance.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I go in to talk to you, it's going to be about uptime and how I'm going to treat your elevator different than everybody else because I'm using tools that prescribe what need to be done.
Right.
In conjunction with my, 20, 30, 40 plus year technician who's now going to do things that are different than what it's been done. We're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
showing up to listen to your elevator. We're
Right.
going to know where things are and go from there.
Yeah. No, I love it. I
So I
love it.
think that's the change, right?
Yeah.
It's changing from the mindset of selling a box, right? This magical box of what you're going to magically do for them to I'm going to do it because of this.
Yeah, yeah, I like that, and what I can see is it also educates the whether the end user is actually asking for the data or the company is actually providing the data. They start to realize that there's a way to be aware of that. So, for example, I mean, you shared an example of a building owner or building taking an elevator out of service without telling the company, right? And it's like, okay, they need to be educated too, right? They can learn that that's not the time to do it. What did you say? Like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they were taking their elevator down, and
Yeah. In a major metropolitan city on a 28-story traction car,
mm,
now we start to question, like a rope's being, the weight of the car changed. Do I have to change the counterweight? You just can't put that car in service. I mean, I remember being called to an elevator once, years ago that they took out of service. And then, we came to see what was going on. And, when the doors opened, here's the sill, the floor was sitting almost that much.
oh wow,
And they put in a new floor. It was above the sill. And I'm like, it's a tripping hazard.
right,
This can't be, no, and they changed the weight of the car. I mean, it was just, so then they had to get the company back. They had to tear the whole floor out, it was just a mess. So yeah, we want to be able to, at the end of the day, the elevator's owned by the building, right?
right,
And it's their responsibility to ensure its service and how the people interact with the elevator, right? And we don't see enough of that. And
right,
phones and emergency communication, they should be taught on all these things. I mean, I constantly see where elevators are being held and the people are timing out the door operator. Well, the wear and tear on that door operator, now you can't say the door operator is going to last
sure,
if it's constantly being, timed out and torn, and having issues. And we can see it. So now we can direct facility managers to the time when that floor is. And I've caught a cleaning crew, every day, 7 something in the morning, it hits the same floor and bottlenecks the building. And so they were able to get a facility manager to go up there. And sure enough, it was a cleaning guy talking to one of the people on the floor and, had the cart
sure,
in the door and, but we were able to say, hey, if you go up there right now, it's being held.
right,
And now they can go, but they can also see what floors are holding these, the flow of the building,
yeah,
up. And so you can share more information with the building and get them to understand what their role in this is. And
absolutely,
that's
yeah,
directing people how to use an elevator properly.
for sure, yeah, educating them and really, yeah, just being more aware of what's really going on and how does our interaction with it, affect everybody in this building. So let's talk a little bit more. You talked about 3D detection, and you had talked about the idea that the elevator could recognize a hospital gurney and then express it to a certain floor. Tell me a little bit more about smart behavior and maybe some of these things that we should expect in the future.
Yeah. So as primarily a light curtain company, although we do lots of other things, building management and doors and entrances and things of that nature, light curtains have always been a staple for us. So CabSafe is our 2019 code compliant door reversal edge. It
Hmm.
utilizes a time of flight in the transom of the elevator so that there are no blind spots and being able to pick up people either approaching the elevator or just passing the elevator,
Hmm.
so that it meets the code. And then CabSense is something that we'll be bringing. And CabSense is very cool. So CabSense is able to detect. So imagine a hospital, if you will. I'm on the 2nd floor. I've got a gurney with a person in it. I got to get them up to the 8th floor. I run into the elevator. With CabSense, that elevator, as I go through the sticks, if you will, of the
Sure.
door edges, it's going to observe what went through it and understands what it is, and then will automatically make the ride an express ride in where none of the other floors can call this particular elevator, and it will take
Yeah,
them directly to the 8th floor.
that's fascinating. Yeah.
With our Elevate and our light curtains with the IoT, we are really getting into the time where we can understand what actually goes through the light curtains
Hmm.
and actually print out. Today it's only a 2D picture, But if if someone's holding the door and standing there and the whole elevator times out, and then they go, well, we don't know what happened. I can print out the picture of the guy holding, and you can see it,
Here's a
him
picture of the
holding the
arm.
door.
Right.
Yeah. If you came to NAC last year and you come to NAC this year, we'll have it again, where we did the YMCA or a conga line through it. And then everybody could see you on the screen as you walked through into the door
Oh
of the
my.
elevator.
Wow.
So we're really starting to get into that object recognition and really, we'll really be able to change the environment. So coming next, right, we'll understand the volume detection of the elevator. So, right, it won't stop for new passengers. It makes that express ride. We'll also be able to really understand the behavior of the elevator. And we're doing this brand agnostically through the door edges.
Sure.
So one of the advantages for an elevator company is, we've had remote monitoring and these kinds of things through the controller. But if I'm Rob's elevator company, it's really hard to modernize my way so everything's on a platform. With us, because it's the door edge, and as long as it's an automatic door, right, left hand, center part, opening, whatever it be, as long as it's an automatic door, we can put a door edge on it. Now I can work through all these things, no matter the brand, the make, the model, the age of the elevator. And so now I can put everything onto one platform and share that. And so I think that's where the smart behavior is going to continue to evolve.
Sure. And like you said, unleashing the voice of the cab earlier, right? Just kind of more knowledge, what's happening, and how can we, what can we learn? We don't know everything we can learn yet because we're just learning. But it is an exciting time to see all of that kind of coming together. And I guess as you zoom out and kind of look at IoT across buildings, whether it's smart toilets, smart elevators, what role do you see in elevators play in like a fully connected building of the future?
Yeah, I think buildings are going to continue to become smarter and smarter buildings.
Mhm.
I mean, I can tell you now that they want to, put IoT on toilets, and they're doing so. I mean, think a hotel with 200 plus rooms. If they have a toilet that's, going and starting to run, they're losing tons of money on that.
Sure,
Imagine now that times however many toilets there are. You want to start to see where that money is going. So I think elevators are still the most important vendor a building has, right?
Right.
You can catch a ride to the store, but not the top floor.
Right.
The elevator has to work. What I think we need to do is, though, it shouldn't be this black box or scary, entity. It needs to be its own space, the elevator. It should be comfortable. It should be stylish. It needs to fit the building's facade, but it should no longer be, right, a commodity. It's a strategic asset. And because of that, it needs to be maintained, right, specific to the maintenance control program for that elevator. And then, we really should be helping our technicians by, again, giving them data to go out there and work on a smart building with a smart elevator, right? And prescribe what needs to be because of the behavior of the elevator, not a schedule that says, well, I should be checking this because it's, X amount of months.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like if you're watching the data, then yeah, you're going to be there possibly beforehand, fix what needs to be fixed, and then it doesn't have to crash. You've already got the part, you fix it, and you move on, and greater uptime, like you'd said earlier.
Sure. And bringing proposals to buildings with data that backs up the reason they should spend money changes your conversation with them as well, right? They'll have a better sense that you're bringing them something that truly needs to happen because you have the data to support it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Robert, anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up?
You know what? The elevator industry as a whole is a phenomenal industry, right?
Sure.
We have phenomenal technicians doing great work for the amount of people that use elevators every single day. It's still the safest means of transportation. The uniqueness of elevators, so it's something new every day because every elevator is different, right? Yep. The applications are different. The heights are different. And so it's always an exciting time. And I think we're really in an exciting time to allow the technology that's been out there really help your technicians and help the industry as a whole move to a predictive space. And I think that's the exciting part, right? We're still able to say we're growing in an industry that's been around for, over 100 years, but we're still growing. And I think we're growing every day. And that's, the the great thing about being in the elevator trade is
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
every day is a growth opportunity.
for sure. So last question for you. If you were to talk to young Robert, right? Maybe he's surfing that day and you were to give him some advice about, being in the elevator space, what would you say to him? What kind of advice would you give your younger self or somebody else coming in?
Yeah, I think if you're looking to be in something that's going to challenge you, but give you opportunity to see the future, right? Elevators are it. We're running out of land space to build, and so
Sure.
we're going to continue to build up, right? That's the only thing that you can really say. I know for sure, right? We're definitely going to continue to build. We're going to continue to build up.
Right.
And that's going to take people to do this industry. This is one of the only industries where I really think you can do and make your own course, right? You have the ability to come into this industry and your trajectory can go any way you really want it to go if you put the time in and, kind of keep to the grindstone. There's just, there's no end to the opportunity. And that's what I would tell people, right? If you want something that's endless as far as the opportunities, this is the industry you want to go into.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much for being with me today. I enjoyed the conversation and yeah, this is good stuff.
No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. Please visit our YouTube channel at Elevator Careers or check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe.